Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you the State of Holy Priest for 9.2 Season 3 of Shadowlands. And I know it's been way too long since I made my last video, so let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Holy Priest is going to be starting us off, and then we are going to make a State of the Disc Priest video as well. I have still holding out a little bit of hope that that disc is going to receive a couple more changes, but let's get into what we've got so far for Holy Priest and where I think the spec stands. All right. I know everyone's probably gone over this a million times, but let's get a couple refreshers. Holy Priest, set bonuses. Your holy words begin Divine Conversation. So cast a holy word, you get a buff. That buff makes your next holy word affecting spell give 15 seconds of extra cooldown reduction, all right? So if you cast a holy word and then you cast Flash Heal, it's an extra 15 seconds of cooldown reduction towards Serenity. If it's, for example, a Prayer of Healing or a Renew, it will go into Sanctify, and so on and so forth, right? Furthermore, your 4 set means this very same Divine Conversation buff also makes the effectiveness, the healing or damage on the spell, 60% stronger. Which means that you could effectively cash in Holy Words and always cast a Smite or a Holy Fire, asterisk, after the fact and have them buffed by 60%. One of the bugs of the 4 set is that you could cast Holy Fire, even though Holy Fire is not a Holy Word affecting spell on its own. You need to run Apparatus to do it. But even without Apparatus, you're still able to get that Divine Conversation buff onto Holy Fire, which is pretty interesting right now and does a lot of damage, right? Overall, I like the set bonus. You cycle through Holy Words like a freaking madman, and it's a great throughput increase, and it also makes the spec feel a lot stronger. It's almost like an Ineffable Truth, but it's just like when you get into the flow of chaining the spells together, it's very powerful. And you also have to make sure that you're not casting Holy Words back to back, as they fix the interaction with those Holy Words and Salvation, so you're no longer getting that crazy, ridiculous CDR that you were getting previously. All your healing abilities increase by 10%, Lamau. Damage buff by 15%, we love that. Sanctify cost reduction, Serenity cost reduction, which is great because, again, you're going to be a Holy Word machine. They did change around Afterlife a number of different times. In this current iteration, of course, you are going to die once you net out that res effect. And I think they're doing some things to mess around with Ankh Totem reses, to prevent those Ankh Totem reses and everything from going out as well. Because some people were forcing the Holy Priest's death in an Ankh Totem and then having the res and they'd get a free battle res. But there's a lot of extra steps that kind of go into that. Kind of neat, but it seems more like some very, very niche interactions and niche effects that you'd have to deal with there. Guardian Spirit also has a bit of an interaction. Mostly this is just like a rephrase, but the Guardian Angel talent is down here at the bottom. The healing bonus and the cheat death bonus are now split when you take that Guardian Angel talent. And so even if the cheat death procs, you still keep that healing bonus for its usual duration, which in my eyes makes Lasting Spirit a lot better in an M+ environment. It allows you to really more effectively kind of ignore your tank when you might be otherwise dealing damage and you have Guardian Spirit on the target. Holy Word Chastise, big damage buff. Symbol of Hope gives less mana back, but it's a 3-minute cooldown with a shorter channel, which is particularly amazing in a key environment, as a number of your tanks, like Vengeance Demon Hunters with their Fiery Brand, but particularly Prot Paladins with their 1.5-minute CD, which is really much less than that for Ardent Defender. Knocking a minute off of that every 3 minutes in a key environment is just so good for their mitigation and makes them even tankier than they are already. For other classes that have like 3-minute CDs like Icebound Fortitude, it's not the end of the world. Like it's still like pretty good cooldown reduction that you can mix into them, and just communicating that and getting your tanks used to that feels great. Also, the second taken off of the channel may not seem like much, but I gotta tell you, when you're chaining into chaining pulls, which you really will be with the new affix, and we'll talk about that in a sec, having that extra second knocked off and only having a 4-second channel does feel really, really nice. Okay, we'd already talked about, of course, the Afterlife change. Binding Heal, the ability is replaced with Binding Heals, which is basically a heal or flash heal will just always heal you. So, always be casting heal onto other targets. Make sure Trail is hitting other targets as well. And then you're going to be in great shape and just getting even more flash concentration value for the next raid. Woo! Really doubling down on what we're good at, right? Cosmic Ripple gets moved. They sort of swap the positions of Binding Heal and Cosmic Ripple. So Binding Heal is going to compete with Guardian Angel and Afterlife. So it's kind of an easy take in a raid environment. Whereas Cosmic Ripple is going to compete with Surge of Light, which is notable for our Flash Conch lovers because that's usually your free refreshes of your ability. So you have to trade a bit more throughput if you're comfortable resetting that cooldown of, or resetting that duration of Flash Concentration by hard casting Flash Heals, which may not be for everybody, and certainly may not be the right decision on every encounter because there's a lot of movement in Sepulcher of the first ones. Finally, Prayer Circle gets revamped to give you cost reduction for Prayer of Healing. Yay! But still, Prayer of Healing just does not do very good healing in this expansion. Even though, technically, yeah, it does have interaction with our set bonuses. So does Flash Concentration, and you could just keep getting further and further buffs for that, right? So I'd say in a raid environment, I don't anticipate too terribly much to change in terms of how we're playing. We are, of course, going to get the double legendaries. And what I'm most looking forward to is splitting my time between those double legendaries, whether it is for Necrolord, as you see right here in one of the tests that we were doing from Prototype Pantheon, where you get a Rattling Mage friend to come around and help you with just pumping out more and more output. It feels pretty good when you have the Rattling Mage out and you're getting that further output increase. Sorry about the lag, this is kind of PTR these days. It actually does a pretty respectable amount of output. Of course, you are going to be able to get the buffs depending on whichever soulbind that you're going to run with. And so I found some just pretty good uses whenever I was able to get full channels of Divine Hymn off. And there was a couple different areas depending on the Pantheon where you'd be able to just get full channels off and still take great advantage of your Rattling Mage to help you pump out some additional output. In a lot of my experiences, it looked like Necro was going to pump out the most throughput. But I did particularly like Fade on a number of fights because of the way that you can maneuver around onto a bunch of the different positions, how well you're going to be able to get multiple Divine Hymn casts off at a time. A lot of those things felt really, really powerful in this raid because there's just tons of movement. There's just tons of situations where you might need to blink through a Halo-like effect to avoid dying or just taking extra damage. Notably on the Dissegni fight, you have to go through multiple waves of Halos, and you have to take that Halo debuff and then run away from the next Halo until that first debuff drops, and then go back and forth, right? So there were a couple different times like that where you may do a little bit less HPS, you may not be able to get the constant cooldown, or the constant cast of Divine Hymn every single second. You know, you might have to hold on to it a little bit depending on what the group is asking for, but in particular, I did really like Faye's sort of intangibles, that they're not always increasing your HPS, but they are going to be giving you a lot of value for surviving, better being able to plant your feet and just start spamming out some big fat heals and big fat spot healing in particular, which is always a major, major priority when you're in a progression environment, right? So, love that. Like I said, I do think if you want to prepare for Covenants, Necro Faye, definitely big ones to be watching for as you get into Sepulcher, the first ones. In a key environment, however, I do think that you are going to be running with Kyrian day in and day out. I did actually try quite a bit of Necro in keys, but because your Rattling Mage, your Pallid Command Legendary, does not do any damage. As a healer, it only heals, and as a damage dealer, it only damages, which is really dumb and annoying. But if it actually did some damage, then maybe you could consider it, but it does not, so we are back to full-time Kyrian Boon Brothers and getting that extra cooldown reduction out of Boon from the Legendary, right? As I mentioned previously, if they ended up fixing up Harmonious Apparatus, or sorry, if they ended up fixing the Divine Conversation bug, where you could cast a Holy Word like I'm doing right here, and then cast the Holy Fire and get that really fat, juicy, buffed Holy Fire, if they do fix that, I think that there could, very much asterisk, maybe, there very much could be a world where you could run Harmonious Apparatus in a key environment if you're really comfortable with your tank, if maybe the key level's not super crazy, ridiculously high, and you could probably net out a decent chunk of extra damage that way. Some dungeons, probably like Sanguine Depths is most notable for dungeons where you would probably never, ever, ever, ever drop Flash Concentration because there's just so much damage to it. But I do have to say, after my experiences messing around with the encrypted affix, it is just extremely, extremely fun to play with the Dismantler and the additional boons that you're netting out. You can pretty much spam boon off on the GCD and do so much extra damage. Currently, it is bugged where it's giving you more cooldown reduction for your Covenant ability than it's supposed to, which basically lets you net out extra boons that you probably should not have. But even still, there's 2 cooldowns with your Covenant ability, right? There's the boon ability itself, but then there's also the Ascended Blast. So even if they do end up making sure they fix that encrypted bug, you would still be able to blast out boons almost every single GCD, which is a substantial damage and priority target increase in almost every situation. So that's going to net you a lot more prio target damage, a lot more boss damage, and a lot more damage on the important mobs. Because with Holy Priest, and this is most healers, yeah, it's great to do mass AoE, but more often than not, what is really required in a lot of groups is prio damage. That's why we saw Sub-Rogue just be ridiculous in Season 2, right? It's because, yeah, everyone can AoE well, but then when you AoE everything down and the Shard of Halkias is still at 40% health, and you have to single target that down for another minute on Fortified, high keys, it's like, that feels terrible, right? So keep that in mind as you're going into your dungeons, but I am fairly convinced going into this next patch that Holy Priest will be the 2nd highest damage dealer in an M+ environment, just under Shaman. I think the rise, really, or the continued rise of Frost Mage and how easily you could just drop Power Infusion into them constantly. You're getting the further upgrades for your conduits and everything. So running like the PI conduit and giving, 12, 15 seconds of cooldown reduction on PI and just always being able to drop it no matter what onto a Frost Mage, which looks to be continuing to kill it going into this next patch. It's a lot of extra damage you're giving to them. Again, cooldown reduction that you're getting out of the Dismantler from the encrypted affix, even more boons that you're getting out, even more Lava Bursts or blue meatballs out of Ascended Blasts that you could basically be chucking out all the time, no matter what. And I think that's going to do an extremely good job for improving the spec's damage. Once again, you're not as concerned about tank maintenance because of the fact that Guardian Spirit is going to be super powerful, because you can give additional support to your tank, namely if they're Prot Pally or VDH, where you can almost instantly reset their cooldown, right? With something like Symbol of Hope. All of those things start to come together and help make your tank stronger, safer, while you're able to deal more damage. Because as we've seen a number of times, Holy Priest does a lot of damage, and even more now that they buffed every single ability by 15%. But whenever you have to heal, all that damage just hard stops. Now you have more ways to be able to net out additional defensive power for your team, and the more boons you're getting, you're still producing some sort of passive healing along the way, right? So my game plan for Holy Priest going into the next patch: Kyrian when it comes to keys, all day, all night. Necro Fae for a lot of the raid instances. I think many of the encounters, Desegni, actually, I would say Desegni, which is the Halo sort of boss. Artificer also has a Halo-like effect. Those are bosses where I'm very, very strongly going to be looking to play Night Fae for, just to make it that much easier for me to reduce my own damage taken, reduce a lot of the pressure on my team, on my own mana and everything like that. Those are going to be big prios for me. Some of the other encounters, like maybe Skolex, where you're going to cycle through the raid, taking ever-increasing damage from a big old worm. I think that will be an area where I will probably lean a bit more towards Necrolord for the additional defensive value, and also it's really about just pumping as much output as you possibly can in those key areas, because it's basically the boss is going to continue to ramp in damage all day, and after it finishes ramping, you gotta force the boss to drop his stacks and force him to stop the raid damage, and you're also going to have to do a lot of prio targets to a couple different people. Something like Anduin, I think, is also going to be just a pure HPS blast of a fight, and being able to have Divine Hymn, being able to have the cooldown of Unholy Nova, Rattling Mage on hand, and of course Salvation to be able to help top off those Befouled Barriers can also be another really potent bit of utility that you can really bring to your group. So a lot of good value, I think, for Holy Priest in the next raid. From a world first perspective, I don't anticipate a lot of Holy Priests being run, of course, but I think there are some fights which look to be single Disc Priests, where guilds in the world first might anticipate bringing 2 Disc Priests to an end boss fight. So they might say, all right, we'll run a Disc and a Holy on this fight, continue to help sort of gear up that second Priest while they play Holy, because we think they'll play Disc on the end boss. But really, we don't know everything that's going to happen for this next raid, and that makes it extremely, extremely exciting to see what might lie in store. I am extraordinarily excited for what Holy Priest is going to bring. I think it's going to be the best season of M+ yet for the spec, and I think in raids, it's just going to improve. I'm not convinced it's going to be some mainstay in all these high-end guilds or anything like that. That'd be nice. But I still very much am hopeful that it's going to bring more than it did previously. And that's always going to be a step in the right direction, right? Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any other questions or want to see any of the VODs, comments down below. In the description, I'll have my live stream, so you can always check out whenever we're doing PTR content. And I got tons of VODs, and we'll be making more videos and everything as we get closer to 9.2's release. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. Like I said, questions, hit me up in Discord or in the comments down below. Sorry it took so long to make this, guys. Love your patience. Thank you so much, dudes. Have a great night. Boop.